What is good, Raider Nation? It's your boy Sanjit back at it with another video. Today, we are talking about the guys that the Raiders could realistically draft in the second round. We did a video in which we talked about some of the guys the Raiders could take in the first round. The video ended up being like 35 minutes long. This one's probably going to be a little bit longer. Hopefully it's not, but if it is, my camera might occasionally cut out. But let's talk about this, man. There's so many great players in this class, and you know, to be honest, you guys, one of the unique things with this class is different than some of the other classes in the past is that outside of, Cam Ward, outside of Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, and then I'd probably throw Armin Membaugh in there as well. Outside of those four guys, the guy that goes number 5 could probably also go number 18th. The guy that goes 15th overall could probably also go early on in the second round. There's not a whole lot of guys that are just like uniquely better than other guys, if that makes sense. Last year we had guys like, Olu Fashanu, for example, who we knew was going to be a top 12 to 15 pick. Like, Fashanu would have never went in the second round. But this year we have guys that are like Will Campbell, for example, where although he's being projected as a top 5 pick, like, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes, 27th overall. Like, I would not be surprised if that ends up happening. We have other guys as well in this class. Will Johnson, projected as a top 10 pick. Some people are like, hey, he might not go in the first round. And there's just so many guys across the board that are like that. Kyle Williams is projected as a third-round pick. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes top 20. And there's, again, just guys like that across this board. And we might even see like 8 quarterbacks get drafted outside of the first round, but like in the second and third round. Like, there's a chance we see a ton of quarterbacks get drafted. But we're going to talk about it, right? We're going to talk about all the second-round prospects that the Raiders could take. We're going to get right into it. I do think that we're going to see 3 quarterbacks get drafted this year in the first round. I think this is one of those drafts where teams are going to say, hey, Shedeur Sanders may not be a perfect quarterback. He might not be, the guy you're going to take with second overall pick that you're willing to trade the house for. But a team like the Steelers, who picks usually in the bottom third of the draft, if not always the bottom half of the draft, they might say that Shedeur Sanders is a good prospect, and we have the 20th, 21st overall pick. We can just kind of sit there and let this guy fall to us, and he's still a good prospect. Jackson Dart has a ton of upside. Some team might say, like the Dolphins, that, hey, we usually are picking in the bottom half of the draft, and if Mike McDaniel is the coordinator and coach that we think he is, this might be the draft where that quarterback does slip and ultimately fall to us, right? So there are guys that I think will end up going in the first round. I think those 3 quarterbacks have a real chance. Now, if Shedeur or Jackson Dart do not fall, or if they don't get taken in the first round, the Raiders have to consider both of these guys in the second round, and I would say Shedeur Sanders more than Jackson Dart, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jackson Dart ends up being the best quarterback out of this class. The guy has a ton of potential and upside. The way he processes, the way he's able to get the ball out there. If those 2 guys are there in the second round, the Raiders should potentially draft him. Obviously, it'll come down to what Chip Kelly thinks about these guys. I think that Chip Kelly is going to be the Raiders head coach in about 3 years. As soon as Pete Carroll's ready to retire, I think Chip Kelly takes over. And then, of course, there's guys like Jalen Milroe as well that you can potentially consider in the second round. Will Howard already has experience with Chip Kelly. He's run that scheme and system. Quinn Ewers has been brought in privately with the Raiders, right? If those guys are there in the second round, I could see the Raiders considering some of these guys. Again, this class doesn't have, let's trade up to take a quarterback, but they do have guys that have potential. Honestly, a lot of these guys could have easily went back to college and risen their draft stock. Jalen Milroe is a guy that some people felt should have went back. Obviously, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders did not have any eligibility left, but Milroe's a great example. Quinn Ewers could have gotten like $7-8 million if he looked to transfer and stay in college, according to the reports, right? So it will be interesting. Quarterback's not a position I want to spend too much time on. A running back is a position I want to spend a lot of time on. No, maybe not too much, but let's talk about the running backs. I think there's a chance we're going to also see 3 running backs go in the first round. I think what Saquon Barkley did this past season has teams thinking like, hey, maybe the running back position does matter a little bit, right? The Steelers might say, hey, we need to get a running back, right? They lost their starting running back from last year. They've signed a couple guys in free agency. They had some promising guys even from last year. But I could see the Steelers saying, hey, if Travion Henderson is there, some people think Henderson is, he's not Ashton Genty, but he has that type of upside, right? At least he hasn't statistically proven it, but some people think he has that type of potential. Now, for the Raiders, I think there's a chance he's there in the second round, and if he is, you draft Travion Henderson. The guy, to me, is going to be an elite running back. He's very fast, quick, explosive. Yesterday we talked about Ashton Jeanty a lot, and the start quickness, right? Being able to stop yourself, change direction, and get back to 100% speed. Henderson has that ability in his game, right? If we're going to take one running back in the second round, assuming Ashton Jeanty and Amari and Hampton are not there, which I don't think they are. I think both guys go in the top 10, which might be a little bit of a hot take, but I just don't see Hampton getting past the Bears, assuming Ashton Jeanty is already off the board. So with that, if that ends up happening, Travion Henderson would be my pick, right, as like that third running back to take. Another guy that I really like is going to be Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, and I might be a lot higher on Caleb Johnson than I think the consensus might be, but Caleb Johnson reminds me so much of Le'Veon Bell, right? He reminds me so much of a guy that's like, he's big for a running back, obviously, so he's not the fastest, but he's big and he moves well. Right, he's patient. He has great vision. He moves well. He breaks tackles because obviously he's big. And that's the type of running back that the Raiders could potentially get behind, right? Like, if the Raiders want to be a run-first team with Geno Smith, remember, Smith had the most success while the Seahawks were able to have success running the football. If the Raiders want that, you got to get a running back to kind of match that. Now, obviously, Ashton Jeanty, best case scenario, but there's still guys like Caleb Johnson that I think would have so much success if they're in a good run scheme. And I think the Raiders could potentially have a good run scheme with this coach specifically, right? Caleb Johnson's a guy I would love for the Raiders to bring in the second round. He'd be he's my fourth running back in this class, right? Jeanty, Hampton, Henderson, and then Caleb Johnson's number 4. And I should say, I don't see that much of a difference between Hampton and Henderson, to be honest, guys. I'm not as high on Hampton as I think the people that do like mock drafts and those things have been, but I do also understand the potential with him as well, right? Being at North Carolina doesn't benefit a running back either, right? There are other options at the running back position, but I'm not sure I would target any other running back outside of those 4 guys. Quishon Judkins is probably the 5th guy I would potentially target as well. We're not going to do a third round video. Honestly, it's just going to get way too deep. But I do want to say that I really do like RJ Harvey a lot at a UCF. I think RJ Harvey has the potential to be a really, really, really good running back. To me, he's the Josh Jacobs of this class. He's not the fastest, not the quickest, not the most explosive, but the guy's really good in those categories. But what separates him is his vision and his jump cut ability. And we know with Josh Jacobs, that's what it was. That's what made him an elite. Right, Josh Jacobs would see a crease to the right as he's running to the left. Bam, he hits that gap and he's gone. Maybe not for a touchdown, but he'll get like 20, 30 yards before he gets caught. And RJ Harvey kind of has that in this game. Now, I think he could be a third round candidate for the Raiders. And there's other running backs I really like in this class as well. Jordan James out of Oregon is another running back that I obviously like. Raheem Sanders, another guy. But again, I probably wouldn't take these guys in the second or third round. Probably a little bit later, 4th, 5th round. Jaquavius Marks out of USC. Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt, Arizona. He was the MVP of the East-West Shrine, right, which is the number 2 All-Star game. There's another running back that I really like. His name's Shanderick Powell. He's out of Central Arkansas, I think. He had the second most explosive numbers right after Ashton Jeanty. And in fact, his numbers are comparable to Ashton Jeanty. Now, he had a lot less carries, but on a per carry basis, his numbers were incredibly and he didn't only have 10 carries. The guy had hundreds of carries, right? And I watched him at the Hula Bowl. He was an invite to the Hula Bowl. He was one of the guys I actually told the director of the Hula Bowl. I said, hey, bring this guy in if you can. And the director of the Hula Bowl actually brought him in. So, and to be fair, he had a 70-yard touchdown in the actual Hula Bowl game. Unfortunately, got called back because a wide receiver held 30 yards downfield, which was unnecessary. So it would have been a touchdown anyways. But Shanderick Powell's another guy to kind of keep an eye on. He's a running back. I think he'll be a late round pick, but the explosiveness that he has is there. Now, he's not a feature back. He's 5'7" and a half. So he's not a feature back, but he could be a guy that can come in and have 12 touches in a game, right? And you have to just kind of get creative. And I think with Chip Kelly, he could use those type of guys, right? Shanderick Powell will run away from people. He's fast. He's quick. He just has elite vision, man. It's just different the way he is. So he's a guy that I'm definitely going to consider later on in the rounds. Let's get back into the actual video, right? Guys in the second round that the Raiders are going to take. Wide receivers, kind of interesting. I feel like every year this happens where wide receivers are kind of all over the board, right? And, this year, I don't think it's going to be a lot different. Zay Flowers was a guy that I was like, hey, this guy's going to be a superstar. But he went to a lower level college, right? I think it was Boston College that he was at. He didn't go to the Senior Bowl, right? Instead, he went to the East West Shrine, which made sense because they had found him and offered him really early on in the process. And then the Senior Bowl tried getting him later on, and he declined the Senior Bowl. And at the East West, he dominated. And I was like, this guy's it, man. He's going to be a stud. And I think he was the fourth receiver taken in that class. And I think he is probably the best of the guys that were drafted. But it's just weird how wide receivers kind of get valued and taken. Brian Thomas Jr. is another guy, right? He was, I think, like a late first-round pick last year with the Jags. Arguably the best wide receiver from last year's class. Justin Jefferson was not the first wide receiver taken, right? He's like the fourth or fifth, and he's the best in the NFL right now, right? In the second round, I don't think Tetra McMillan's going to fall, but we've been hearing a lot that this guy may fall. Some teams aren't as high on him. In fact, now he's being projected as like the 11th overall player or 12th to the Cowboys, when just a month and a half ago, he was projected as like a top 5 pick, right? And, as more information comes out, as the process gets closer, keep in mind, I'm very in tune with all the updates that come out of the draft, right? And Tetra McMillan's stock has been falling, right? So would he be a pick if he was there, like my pick if he was there in the second round? Absolutely. I'd be all in. But I think chances are he goes in the first round. I think some team will say we need a 6'3.5" wide receiver. Matthew Golden could be there in the second round, right? It's weird because we talked about Golden, Igbuka, and Luther Burden in yesterday's video, and I said these are guys you might draft the 6th overall pick. They may also be there in the second round, right? Again, wide receiver is just weird, right? It's that one position where I'm not super confident. I feel like I see something, and this will be the first year where I actually watch the wide receivers tape, and I have opinions, and we'll see how it translates, right? And of course, we'll continue to make changes and updates and those type of things as we get smarter with the wide receiver position. But O-line, I've done it for years. So I know where I was wrong with my offensive tackles, offensive guards, right? I've learned, I've adjusted, and then I know what works, right? I did the same thing with D tackles. I know what works, I know what doesn't work, right? So we'll see if it works with wide receivers. But I'll just give you guys a couple of examples. I think Kyle Williams is arguably the best wide receiver in this class. I would argue Kyle Williams right now is more defined as a wide receiver than even Travis Hunter. And again, I think Travis Hunter is the first wide receiver that comes off the board. He's my number 1 wide receiver because of the upside and potential, especially when he gets in the NFL and the coaching that he's going to get, right? He just moves differently. But Kyle Williams isn't that far away from Travis Hunter. Kyle Williams, to me, the release that this guy has, right? The first 2 or 3 steps, it's elite. It is elite. And I don't know why he's not being ranked higher. Right? He was at Washington State. Imagine if this guy went to Ohio State. Imagine if this guy got the opportunity to play at Alabama, right, or LSU, where we know what those teams are able to produce. And the thing is he could have transferred if he wanted to this past season. He had multiple offers. He decided to stay at Washington State for whatever reason. But the tape does not lie. He's my wide receiver 2 coming in right after Travis Hunter. And we'll see in 2 years if I'm wrong and how wrong I am, right? We'll see in about 2 years. And of course, we'll definitely be recapping some of what I'm saying right now in this video in about a year or 2 years. Love Kyle Williams. If he's there in the second round, I would run the card in myself, right? I'd fly to Green Bay and I'd put the pick in myself. So Kyle Williams, the guy I really, really want. Luther Burden is another guy I'm very high on. I watched this guy's tape. He just looks incredible to me, right? Watching this tape. When he gets the ball in his hands, how he breaks tackles is really impressive. He kind of reminds me of a guy like Deebo Samuel almost, but he's more refined in the route running. It's interesting with Burden because, this year Missouri struggled a little bit, right? Brady Cook took a step back in my opinion, but Burden still had a pretty damn good season, right? And he had, I think, 30 or 31 broken tackles, which was still the most in all of college, and he didn't have nearly as many catches this year. Keep in mind, Luther Burden was ranked as the highest player coming into this class by the NFL scouting agency, right? The official scouting agency. They send out reports to every single NFL team. They also send out those same reports to some NFL agents, which I happen to be friends with one of them, and the guy sent me a copy of that as well. Burden was the #1 player coming into the season, so that's how highly he was regarded, right? I think Burden is probably going to go in the top 15 picks, but if he's there in the second round, he'd be my guy, right? I'm not as high on Ibuka and Golden, and I think in yesterday's video I did a poor job making that known. I kind of categorized Golden, Ibuka, and Burden all together. I don't think that's the case. Hunter's my #1 wide receiver. Kyle Williams is #2. Burden's probably #3. McMillan's right there as well, right? I'd say it's 3A, 3B with McMillan and Burden. But I would give Burden the A and I'd make McMillan the B, right? And then Golden and Ibuka are probably 4A, 4B for me. Let's get into it. Let's get into the offensive tackles. So obviously, I think the one thing that's going to happen is we are going to get one pure offensive tackle and Armin Membao get drafted in the top 10. There's a chance we don't get another offensive tackle drafted in the first round. There's a real chance. Now, I do think some teams, because teams need offensive tackles, especially in the bottom of the first round, right? The Texans traded away their starting left tackle. Josh Simmons, I think, is the other first-round tackle. Josh Connerly, I think, is the last first-round tackle. Will Campbell, I would not value him as a tackle, and I don't even think he's the best guard in this class, to be honest. I would not put a first-round grade on Will Campbell, right? I just wouldn't. And obviously, we haven't really seen him at guard, so maybe he gets into the NFL, and he's the best guard in the NFL. But, I've watched guys like Tyler Smith go from Tulsa playing left tackle, and you saw him bullying people, and then he gets into the NFL, and he's a bully at guard, in the NFL as well. I know what works in terms of like the bullies from tackle to guard. The type of bully that Tyler Smith was at Tulsa, Anthony Belton's that same type of bully, right? So I want to kind of see this guy at the next level. I would value Anthony Belton over Will Campbell as a guard specifically. We will see what ends up happening. Now, for the Raiders, we need a guard. So Anthony Belton would be my #1 guard if he's available in the second round. There's a couple other guards, and we'll just go back and forth between the guard and tackle list. Tyler Booker would be another guy that I'd be all over if he was there in the second round. The one unique thing with Tyler Booker that kind of gets overlooked is the arm length Tyler Booker has is like 34.5, 35 inches. So his arms are as long as offensive tackles' arms. And some people were concerned that, hey, this guy didn't do a lot of bench press reps. We have to realize guys with long arms struggle on the bench press because you have to push that bar a lot further than other guys. And it's just what it is, right? It doesn't mean you're a weak player, right? If they did a 1 bench press max, the guys with the long arms would outproduce the guys with the shorter arms sometimes, right? Tyler Booker was part of the 500-pound bench press club. 500 pounds, it's ridiculous, right? He was a part of that. And I saw an article, I forget who the other player was. The article was talking about the other player, and it said that Tyler Booker was also in that club. And this article was like a year and a half, 2 years ago, right? Tyler Booker has crazy long arms. He's tall. He's just massive, right? And his tape's really, really good. He moves really, really well. Generally guys that are long and move well are mostly going to be guys that will have success at tackle. At guard, you don't have the same type of success if you move really, really well. At guard, you got to be really strong, right? And Tyler Booker has shown that he's pretty strong, right? So I do think he'll be a guy that can play guard and have success. And Anthony Belton, Tyler Booker, to me, 1A, 1B, but Belton to me is 1A, right? And this is a little bit of projection because Belton's never played guard in the NFL. But the thing with Belton is he's bigger than Tyler Booker. He's longer than Tyler Booker, I think, from an arm perspective. Don't quote me on that. Actually, he might not be. Just don't quote me on any of that. But I think Anthony Belton will be the best guard out of this class, right? But I do think Tyler Booker's right there. I would take either of those guys with that second round pick. There's other guys I would take in the second round as well. If the Raiders wanted to get a right tackle and Josh Simmons or Josh Connerly were there, I'd draft both of them. But I don't think they're actually going to be there. If Will Campbell was there in the second round, I would take him. I would definitely take him. But it would be after Anthony Belton, and it would be after some of the actual guards that are listed, right? So going back to the guard list, Tyler Booker is a guard that I really, really like. Gray Zabel's another guy I like, but I think he plays center in the NFL, not guard. And I think as a center, I think he'll go in the first round, right? I think Gray Zabel's going to be a really, really, really good player as he kind of gets into that, as he gets into the NFL. Another guard that I like that I will take in the second round is going to be Donovan Jackson, and then Tate Ratledge is right there for me as well. Even Jonas Savania is a pretty solid guard, but I probably would not take him in the second round. Some people have talked about him. You know, the thing with guys you're taking in the second round is second round guys are guys you want to take that have elite upside, right? Like elite traits type of guys, right? So Jackson Powers Johnson is a great example of a guy you take in the second round. His tape was elite in college. He's physically dominant, right? He's the guy you want to get in the second round because if it clicks, if it actually works out, he's going to be a superstar in the NFL. And Powers Johnson's already proven he's arguably our best offensive lineman, right? He's going to be one of the top 2 or 3 centers at the end of this season. And there's guys with that type of upside, right? Anthony Belton's an example of that. Another guy, Charles Grant, is another guy I would consider in the second round. And the Raiders met with Charles Grant as well. So he's another guy that, you know, he's, although he's smaller from a frame perspective than Anthony Belton, he also dominates on tape, right? Now, that is at William & Mary, which is obviously a lower level school, but he's another guy I would consider in the second round. And then just to throw it out there, a guy to kind of keep an eye on, Dylan Fairchild. If you guys have not seen this guy, Google Dylan Fairchild. Just look at an image of him. The guy reminds me of Richie Incognito, and he's like massively built, right? He's kind of built the way Mekhi Becton's built, right? Where he just looks different, right? And he might not be as tall as Mekhi Becton, so don't quote me on that. But just like the way he's built is it's interesting, right? I should say. Among the offensive tackles that I would also consider in the second round, you know, some people said, hey, why are you not as high on Wyatt Milliam as you are on some other guys? You know, Milliam's being ranked as the 74th player according to the mock draft database. That's just an average of every single mock draft. It's just average of 74 is where he's being picked. I don't think Milliam goes in the top like 4 or 5 rounds. I'd be very surprised if he does. First and foremost, Milliam is a guard, not a tackle at the next level. 2, at the Senior Bowl, he was overwhelmed a lot, right? And the thing is West Virginia has a great offensive line coach, and they run a really, really elite scheme. They have one of the best offensive line coaches in all of football, right, in the United States. Probably a top 10 offensive line coach. The thing with West Virginia is that scheme's elite, but when Wyatt Milliam went to the Senior Bowl and he played a lot of snaps at guard, it just didn't translate well. He was oftentimes overpowered. He wasn't able to anchor down. We didn't have that issue with some other guys, right? Like, even, for example, Josh Connerly was able to hold his own on pretty much 98% of the reps out there, right? Anthony Belton dominated, even higher than that, right? So I would not target Wyatt Milliam in the second round. Ariante Ursery, I like him. I think he's good, but he is on the slower side in terms of foot speed. Kelvin Banks, I would definitely take in the second round as well, but he is going to be a guard most likely, not an offensive tackle. There's going to be a lot of tackles that play guard at the next level in this class, right? Let's get into defensive tackles. There's a whole list of guys that I would consider from the Raiders. So obviously Mason Graham, I think, goes in the first round. I would be shocked if these 3 guys also don't go in the first round. Derek Harmon, Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan. I think Walter Nolan might be the first defensive tackle taken in this class. If not the first, I think he'll be the second right after Mason Graham. I also wouldn't be surprised if Kenneth Grant goes 1, right, or as the first D tackle. It's an interesting class at the D tackle position. There's no consensus number 1 defensive tackle, at least according to the NFL scouts, right? I know it's different in the media, right? Everybody's saying Mason Graham's a top 5 pick. NFL scouts don't have a consensus number 1 defensive tackle in this class. And trust me, I know multiple scouts. They're not all NFL guys. There's some that are like portal guys, right, for college football. But Mason Graham's not the consensus number 1, right? I hope that's clear to people. Although he is most likely going to be the number 1 defensive tackle taken, I just wouldn't be surprised if he's not. And I you know, again, don't want to get into it. Derek Harmon, love his tape. If he's there in the second round, I would consider him as well. But he is kind of similar to like Christian Wilkins and Adam Butler, where he's more of a pass rusher. And he is also a guy that's going to mostly go to the swim move. Kenneth Grant is another guy that I'd definitely take Kenneth Grant in the second round. I think he has the most upside in this class, right? It's because of the body structure that he has, and pair that up with the movement that he has. He's a guy that I really, really like. I think Kenneth Grant has a ton of upside. And remember, last year, we had a defensive tackle come out of Texas in T'Vondre Sweat. People were like, he's just big. He's like Jordan Davis. That's all he is. Devondre Sweat was the best D tackle from last year's class. The guy dominated. And some people think Devondre Sweat could be the next Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence is arguably one of the top 2 D tackles in the NFL. Dexter Lawrence is arguably better right now than Jalen Carter is, right? And people are saying that Devondre Sweat has Dexter Lawrence type of upside. And he dominated too. It's not like, oh, it's potential and has it. Like, he's dominated on tape, right? Walter Nolan might be the first D tackle taken. If he's there in the second round, I would consider it. But again, I think for the Raiders, if you're going to take a defensive tackle, you have to take a guy that, is on the bigger side and they can play that one technique, right? We need a guy that's a run defender first that could take on double teams. The reason why defensive linemen are shaded in the 1 technique and the 3 technique, and why you have Christian Wilkins playing the 3 technique, and why you would want a guy like Kenneth Grant in the 1 technique is because the 1 technique is going to get double teamed a lot quicker, a lot cleaner, a lot easier to get to that guy. And that guy has the responsibility of going up against 2 interior offensive linemen, as opposed to the 3 techniques going to go up against 1 interior guy and 1 offensive tackle. And there's a huge difference in the strength between offensive tackles and guards, right? Tackles have to be a lot faster and quicker and explosive. Guards just got to be big and strong. That's it, right? Obviously, they have to be able to move well, but they got to be powerful, right? And it's a lot harder to take on 2 interior offensive linemen than just 1 with the tackle. Anyways, the Raiders need a run stopper first, in my opinion, right? Kenneth Grant's a guy I would take in the second round. I also really like Alfred Collins out of Texas. He's also on the bigger side. He's kind of like Devondre Sweat. But the guy that I like the most, and some people are not going to agree with this, is Deon Walker out of Kentucky. This guy's arguably the number 1 defensive tackle coming out this year for me, right? And obviously you do have to realize there's different types of D tackles. Saying, you're taking a D tackle, do understand, just because they're labeled D tackle, they're different positions, right? 1 technique, 3 technique, completely different positions. And there's even now D tackles that you're going to specifically draft to play like, 3 technique would be the furthest to the inside they play, but you even draft D tackles that play like the 4 or 5 technique, right? Guys that are going to line up, on the inside shade of the offensive tackle to the outside shade, right? They're D tackles that line up that far out there, right? You're almost drafting guys to play that role specifically. I'll give you an example. A guy like Omar Norman Lott would be drafted to play that position. A guy like TJ Sanders, and even to a point Walter Nolan, could be drafted to play like that 5 technique. I like Deon Walker a lot. And I know he's not nowhere near ranked the top. Again, the 107 number, doesn't really mean much, right, when it comes to these draft rankings. Again, most of what ends up happening out there is just copy and paste. And that's not a shot at anybody else. I have to say this, but I do say this because I know how it works. I started in the content creation world. I started by basically being a writer, right? I started writing for Just Blog Baby, which covered the Raiders. And when I would do my mock drafts, the first thing I would do is go say, all right, let me look at a consensus of every other mock draft to see where guys are kind of rank, what kind of makes sense for certain guys. And then when I made the transition to the scouting side, which now I'm on the scouting side, right? I work for the Hula Bowl. I do scouting reports for the Hula Bowl, right? I talk to multiple NFL agents. I work for some NFL agents, right, that need to find college players. I do work for them. They legit pay me to do work for these guys, right? And a lot of information that I get, I also talk to guys that are scouts, or guys that I've met that now might work for the Seahawks, for example. I have a close friend of mine that's a scout that works for the Seahawks. Talk to him all the time, right? And there's a lot of guys that I know that have kind of went down that path. And with all that being stated, right, my point in saying this is these rankings are not correct, right? Especially as you get later on. But Deon Walker's a guy that I personally really, really like, right? And the reason why I like this guy so much is, so he's about 6'7", so he's massive. He's like 345 pounds. He's very, very, very hard to move, right? And again, Deon Walker is not going to play defensive end for you, obviously, right? He's a guy that's going to play on the inside. And the thing with a guy like Deon Walker for me is he's so hard to move because he's so big, but he has really, really good footwork. He has really good movement, right? So, for example, like Jordan Davis was a first-round pick like 3 years ago to the Eagles. Jordan Davis was like the introduction to these big defensive tackles that you want to try to bring in. Right? Vita Vea might have been the the original guy, and there's been guys in the past, But like Jordan Davis was like that first guy where people were like, hey, let's see, guys that may not have a lot of production, but they're big and they play a specific role. And we've seen now multiple of these type of guys get drafted, right? T'Vondre Sweat got drafted last year. He ended up having a lot of success, and he went in the second round. Dexter Lawrence was another guy that was kind of drafted that was different, and maybe he was the introduction of these type of players because, he was one of those guys where he was just bigger than everybody. But the thing with Deone Walker that's different to me is the guy has really good movement. And some people will say, hey, his Kentucky tape's not that good, but we got to realize there's schemes involved. And Kentucky's a great example of this. Kentucky plays a lot of 3-down defensive linemen, right? Now, keep in mind, when a defense goes to 3-down defensive linemen, that means Deone Walker is now playing over the offensive tackle. That doesn't make sense. He has to contain the outside. That doesn't make sense. But that's the defense Kentucky plays. So Deone Walker rushes the passer a lot as one of 3 defensive linemen. And, for whatever reason, Kentucky uses that defense. It is what it is. But the thing with Deone Walker is when he got to the Senior Bowl, this guy dominated. He was basically unblockable. He shot gaps well. He moved well. And again, at the Senior Bowl, you're going up against, linemen that are going to be drafted in the top 2 or 3 rounds. This guy was dominating everybody. There was no one that was able to block Deone Walker. And I know there was a play where some people are confused about. I think it was the UNC offensive lineman. I think it's like the 5'9", 5'10" guard. Some people are like, hey, that guy stood up Deone Walker and he shut him down. What kind of player is Deone Walker if you're letting that guy stop him? And people are confused. They think that play was a pass rushing rep. It was not. It was a run rep, right? Deone Walker was 2-gapping. He held his block and he was 2-gapping, right? That was the entire point of that drill. But it's left a lot of people confused with Deone Walker, right? I see it all the time even now that, hey, he's not that good. He got shut down by that one guard, right? But they don't realize that rep was a run rep, not a pass rep. Deone Walker's a guy that I'm very, very high on. And we'll see if he translates, if he doesn't. I just think that there's some guys that just are hard to block and they move well. And when you pair that up, if the guy puts in the effort, they can be great, right? And T'Vondre Sweat's put the effort in, right? T'Vondre Sweat, people are like, hey, this guy, DUI, he parties too much. His stock slipped, and that made him flip the switch that, hey, I want to be great. And he put the effort in, and he's on that pace to be a really, really good football player. If Deone Walker has that type of mindset as well, I think he could be a really, really good player. And there's a couple of the guys I will take in the second round, right? Darius Alexander out of Toledo has elite pass rush potential. Paired up with the movement, he's a guy that's really, really hard to block. Tyreek Williams is a good run defender. He's another guy the Raiders could potentially consider. Edge players, there's so many second round guys. And my camera's going to cut out here in the next 3 to 5 minutes. We're going to just keep going because I don't want to go too fast past these. So the camera cuts out. It is what it is, but we're going to just continue to talk through some of these guys. I'll just use the mouse. It'll be a little bit easier for you guys to track. We're probably not going to touch the first 4 guys, right? I think all 4 of these guys are going to be off the board. And I think there's a chance that we'll get another 4, but I don't know which 4 it'll be. Let's just talk about it. Mike Green, James Pierce Jr., both guys have some issues, but both guys are elite. Both guys have arguably the best tape, up there with Abdul Carter, right? Arguably, those 2 guys are up there with Abdul Carter in terms of tape. And the thing is either of these 2 guys are in the second round. Those are the type of players you want, right? Again, Jackson Powers Johnson, elite traits, elite upside in the second round especially. That describes both of those guys right there. Mike Green has an absolute elite pass rush. Mike Green reminds me of Maxx Crosby, right? He's the only guy in this class that has the Maxx Crosby pass rush technique right at the hands. He's a guy that's going to be all over if he was in the second round. I don't think he makes it outside the top 20, but he does have some assault things that have kind of hindered around in his background. He's been kicked out of his high school team. He was kicked out of high school, I should say. And then he was also kicked out of college. I think he was at Virginia. He was somewhere. I think he was also kicked out there. Don't quote me on that exactly being what it was. But he has had some trouble. James Pierce, another guy that could fall a little bit. People say that he has anger issues that might be uncontrollable. So he's another guy that might not actually be there in the second round because of the tape and the production, the upside. But if he is, I would bring him in, man. I would absolutely bring him in with the hopes that Pete Carroll and Patrick Graham can get this guy right with the leadership of guys like Maxx, Christian Wilkins. James Pierce, to me, is going to be an absolute superstar as long as he puts the work and effort in. But there's other guys as well that I think for the Raiders you have to consider in the second round. Now, I'm going to just turn the camera off because it's going to turn off any second here anyways. But let's talk about some of these guys, right? Donovan Ezraki out of Boston College, and I know I'm saying his name wrong. This guy reminds me of Nolan Smith coming off of the Philadelphia Eagles. This guy has elite movement, elite quickness. He jumps really well inside, outside. He had a really good Senior Bowl as well. The thing with him, though, is that he's not going to be a run defender first. And not even run defender first. There's guys like Maxx Crosby that come out, guys like Austin Booker that come out, who don't show a lot of ability against the run. And teams are going to back off of that a little bit, right? Because they want guys that could, yes, pass rush, but you got to be able to anchor down against the run. And if you struggle in college, you're going to definitely struggle in the NFL, right? But he's a guy that I personally really, really like as a pass rusher. I would take him in the second round, right? We do have to replace Malcolm Koonce. I don't think Koonce is going to end up signing a long-term extension with the Raiders. I don't think we have the cap, honestly. Nick Scorton is another guy that I like. Interestingly, he's a top 5 pick at one point about 5 months back. He's not a guy that I love. He reminds me of Cleveland Farrell. I probably would not draft him, to be honest, even in the second round. Landon Jackson, love him, would draft him. JT Tamalo, love him, would draft him. And then, of course, Braden Swinson's the other guy that I really, really like that I would take in the second round. Let's talk about these guys a little bit. Landon Jackson has an elite cross chop. And I think one of the things with guys coming out of college is if they have one elite move, you want to take that guy because if you can teach him one counter to that elite move that he has or a second move potentially, right? We know Maxx Crosby has an insane toolbox. And I think Maxx Crosby does help some of the other guys, right? I think Malcolm Koonce has developed a little bit because of Maxx as well. If Landon Jackson, who's like 6'5.5", I think even himself, I think he even said that he watches a lot of Maxx and he values Maxx Crosby's tape. If this guy's there in the second round, I think he has the potential to be a top 5 edge player in the NFL. I think he has the potential to be the next Maxx Crosby, right? I really do think he has that. Elite pass rusher. He's humongous, right? 6'5.5". So he would be a really good run defender, right? He just has to continue to develop it, get stronger. I think he's a guy I would absolutely take in the second round. He might actually be there. So we'll see what ends up happening. I could also see a team like the Chiefs saying, hey, we need an edge player. Let's get this guy. JT Tamaloa is a guy that's like 6'5" as well. Big, strong, has good pass rush. Kind of reminds me of Tyree Wilson, but I think he's further than Tyree Wilson. And what's kind of crazy? I hate doing this, but Dave Ziegler screwed the Raiders over so much. It's just ridiculous to me. There's guys like Landon Jackson and JT Tamaloa who you can argue had just as good tape as Tyree Wilson. And these guys are going to be like second round picks, right? And it's just crazy to me because the thing with Tyree Wilson, and I do hope he develops in year 3. I really do hope that. The thing with Tyree Wilson is this set the Raiders back almost, right? Because if he doesn't develop, we wasted the 7th overall pick. And it already kind of looks like that's the way we're going. But you could have had a franchise right tackle. You could have had a Hall of Fame caliber defensive tackle. And we skipped out on that to take Tyree Wilson, right? So it just sucks that the Raiders went down that route. Anyways, another guy that I like is going to be Princely Melon out of Mississippi. I think this guy has the potential to go in the top 15 picks. I think he has the potential to go, in fact, right after Abdul Carter. I think there's potential in this guy being the next pick. The only guy that I saw at the Senior Bowl beat guys like Anthony Belton, Josh Connerly, some of the other offense tackles that were there. The only guy I saw actually have winning reps against those guys was this guy right here. And he's good, man. You put the tape on. This guy's legit, right? He's just a good pass rusher. He's just a good football player. Kind of reminds me of Von Miller. Maybe not the elite first step as Von Miller, but he kind of reminds me of that a little bit. Jack Sawyer's a solid player. I probably wouldn't want him, though, in the second round. I think Braden Swinson's another guy. I think he'll be a first-round pick, but in the second round, I'm all over this guy, man. He has top 10 edge potential as well, right? I should also just throw this out there. The Raiders did bring in Josiah Stewart on a private visit. I would not draft him. He's like 6 feet, right? It just doesn't generally work unless you draft him to be an actual linebacker on the edge that comes off in base defense. That could make sense, but you're not taking that in the second round. I think he goes like round 4 or 5, to be honest with you guys. And there's a couple other guys that I personally like that are coming out this year. So Tyler Barron, I think he's ranked way too low. It's crazy to me that we do this with certain guys. Tyler Barron on tape is better than like pretty much all of these guys right here, right? He's better than every single one of these guys, right? He's better than probably most of these guys, right? Like Tyler Barron on tape, I would say is better than like Jordan Birch, for example, right? And this guy's ranked 71. I don't, that just doesn't make sense to me, right? He's a guy that has a ton of upside. Now, he does have some off-field issues, right? So I should just kind of throw that out there. JJ Weaver is another guy that I personally like. This guy right here, man, Danny Sturgau, he wasn't as good at the Senior Bowl, or at least I didn't pay too much attention to him at the Senior Bowl, which I should probably go back and watch his tape. But at the Hula Bowl, this guy was the best edge player, right? And I noticed him right away. He's built well, right? So I don't know what the consensus is on this guy. Now, he went to Minnesota, so it makes sense that he's not going to be ranked super, super high. But he's a guy that I personally like. He's not a second-round target, obviously, but just keep an eye on him. We'll see how he kind of does. Second-round linebackers, there's a couple of them. Jod Campbell, I'd be all over it in the second round. I wouldn't rule out the Raiders taking a linebacker with the 6th overall pick. You do have Javon Walker out of Georgia, and you have Jod Campbell out of Alabama. I think taking a linebacker with the 6th overall pick would be a mistake. Linebackers a position you could easily fill. Just think about the last 10 years. How many linebackers have the Raiders, actually put the investment into, like first round, top 10 pick, right? Even teams that have invested a top 10 pick, right? Devin Bush, Devin Neal, as examples that just come to my mind. The Lions took a guy 2 years ago, right? None of those guys are top 5 linebackers. The top 5 linebackers right now are all like 4th round picks, right? Sometimes it's all about scheme over the actual player, right? And don't get me wrong, I think Campbell's a really good linebacker, but, is he elite in pass coverage? I don't know. I don't think he is, right? So with that, like, you're going to draft a guy to play linebacker that is elite against the run. I mean, there's 15 other linebackers that you can potentially bring in the 3rd or 4th round that are elite against the run as well, right? So I wouldn't take one, but if he's there in the 2nd round, that's a different conversation, right? He'd be an elite linebacker to have drafted in the 2nd round. Carson Schweinsteiger is another guy coming out of UCLA. Incredible tape, in my opinion, right? This guy's the guy you want. He's a tackling machine. He has upside in pass coverage as well. So he's a guy that I really, really, really like. South Carolina's Demetrius Knight. Some people think he's the best linebacker coming out. I would take him in the 2nd round as well. To me, really, really, really solid linebacker coming out. Danny Stutzman's another guy that I personally like a lot. Probably wouldn't take him in the 2nd round. The only 2nd round linebackers are going to be these 3 guys, right? And that's it. That's the end of the conversation. There's no other guy you're taking. But there are some other guys that I think could be good football players that are going to come out this year. And guys later on as well, right? There was a guy that I really like coming out of Texas, David Benda. I know, 390, not great. You put the tape on. This guy's legit, in my opinion, right? He is absolutely legit. He's a tackling machine. So he's not a guy that's going to be a pass coverage guy, but pass coverage doesn't matter as much, right? From the linebackers. If you want a linebacker that can play on 3rd down, put a safety in. Legit, put a safety in. There's no point in having a linebacker if you want your linebacker to be a coverage guy, right? Get linebackers that can play the run, that can drop back into coverage, that can contain running backs out of the backfield, and that's it, right? Quarterbacks aren't generally throwing it to running backs anyways. And if you come up in a matchup where you absolutely need to shut down some linebackers, start a safety, right? Now, the corners is kind of interesting as well because, I don't really watch corners all that much, right? This year, I've watched wide receivers more. I've watched running backs more. And usually, I only watch offensive linemen and defensive linemen. But this year, I decided to do running backs and wide receivers. But I did not really watch every corner, although I did watch some of the top guys. Will Johnson, love his tape. I don't know why we're hearing that this guy may slip. Some people were concerned about his shuttle. I think it's the shuttle speed, right? I guess it wasn't fast enough. People are like, hey, he's not as fluid as we would like in our corners, which is it's a valid question, right? And I think the what some people were saying is that, hey, if he comes out and his hip fluidity is not there, will he be able to have success, right? It's a valid question, however you look at it. Some people think Jahdae Barron will go before Will Johnson, but the most recent report with the corners is there's no Derek Stingley, there's no Jalen Ramsey, there's no top 5 sure corner in this class, which also means there's a chance we don't even have a first round corner, or we don't get a corner drafted until like pick 25, right? There's a chance that happens. And if you guys just look at some of the trends that have happened in the NFL draft over the last 10 years, running backs have obviously stopped being drafted as much in the first round. Centers, guards aren't drafted as much in the first round. Those are positions that are fairly easy to find. Corner and linebacker is another position recently where you're not drafting these guys in the first round, right? You're no longer taking these guys as high. The reason why that's the case is because they're system positions. Safety is another position. You're not taking one in the first round generally, right? So some people will say, we'd rather get a corner that fits our scheme and system, right? Maybe that's a heavy man scheme or a heavy zone scheme. I still think both of these guys will go in the top 15 picks, but just don't be surprised if they don't, right? Maxwell Harrison, some people think he could be the number 1 corner off the board this year. And notice we skipped Travis Hunter, right? He's a top 3 pick. I value him as a wide receiver. And we're probably not going to get either of these 3 guys in the second round. The only guy that I think the Raiders should draft in the second round, if he's there, of course, any of the 3. But Siobhan Revel Jr., I would highly consider in the second round. I think this guy's talented as hell. And I watched his East Carolina tape. The fluidity that this guy had before his injury was incredible. And if he's going to recover, which I think he will, I would, again, be 100% interested in taking him in the second round. There's a couple of safeties the Raiders should consider. I would consider all 5 of these safeties as second round picks. Second round for the Raiders. We took Trayvon Merrick in the second round. We got 4 really, really, really good years out of Trayvon Merrick. And I think it's time to replace that. Get another safety in the second round. Malachi Starks, to me, is the best safety in this class. He kind of reminds me of Tyrann Mathieu, Budda Baker. Kind of fits that scheme. Kyle Hamilton more recently, right? They're safeties that can roam, that are just, their IQ is like 5 points above every wide receiver, right? They just know what's coming, right? Malachi Starks reminds me of that. And remember, Georgia's defense is a unique defense, right? You got to play too high. You're not going to give up anything over the top. You're going to play a light box oftentimes. And that's going to limit a guy like Malachi Starks, right? For the Raiders, this guy will come in and he'll line up on the line of scrimmage. He'll play linebacker. He'll play as a post safety. He'll play as a 2-split safety. Malachi Starks, to me, is legit. And I would take him in the second round. I don't think he'll be there, but if he is, again, I'd be all in on him. I'm not as high on Nick Emewaru out of South Carolina anymore. I liked him a lot more earlier on in the process. The thing is he does have huge upside and potential, but how much of that is because of the way he's built, right? 6'2.5", 6'3", just looks different, right? How much of the hype is because of that versus the actual production on tape, right? To me, production on tape, Malachi Starks is my number 1 safety. Andrew Mukwaba out of Texas is probably my number 2 safety. This guy's going to be a stud, and I would be all over this if I'm the Las Vegas Raiders. He's going to be really, really good. 5-6 interceptions this past season. Multiple times he got his hands on the ball, right? He had like 17, 18 pass breakups. He's the guy I would be all over. And I wouldn't be mad if we took Xavier Watts, Nick Emewaru, or even Kevin Winston Jr. in the second round. I would not be upset if we took any of those guys either, right? To me, the Raiders got to invest in safeties. Jeremy Chin, Isaiah Polamouth, they're the same type of safety, and neither have ever proven, and Jeremy Chin's already proven the opposite, right? Because he's been in the NFL for a lot longer. Neither have proven that they can play as a true post safety, right? They have 1/3 of the field, and as they're backpedaling, shading to the left side, neither have proven that they can flip the hips and run right if the pass is thrown deep left down the field, and they could run and break that pass up. Neither of them have shown the hip fluidity to be able to do that. And, Jeremy Chin has proven the opposite, right? That he can't do that, obviously. Or he's proven he can't do that. And Isaiah Polamouth, I've seen him miss tackles in the open space, right? Those guys are the same type of safety. I think Jeremy Chin starts. I think Isaiah Pola-Miles the backup. I think the Raiders got to get a free safety. They got to get a guy that can run sideline to sideline. Second round's a good round to take one. And, I'll talk about this in a video tomorrow, but John Spytek basically told us it's not about best player available, right? We're going to use a combination of best player available and need. We're going to use a combination of that, right? And that is how you should draft. It should never just be pure best player available, right? It should always be a combination of that. Because, if the Raiders, if their quarterback's in his final year and the best player available is not a quarterback, you're still going to take a quarterback, right? If you don't have a running back and Ashton Genty's on the board, but let's say the best player available might be a tight end, you're not going to take that tight end over that running back when you have a need at the running back position, right? And John Spytek confirmed that yesterday, right? So just kind of throwing that out there. The Raiders have a lot of options in the second round, right? And a lot of the guys we spoke to, I should also just kind of throw this out there. They could easily be third round guys, right? They could easily slip into the third round. Some of them probably won't, but some of them can, and never overlook that this draft is unique because of the fact that as we kind of get into, once we get past the first 10 picks, the guys that are going to be taken at 11th or 12th could easily be taken at 35, right? Which also means that this draft is so deep that we're going to end up getting guys that we right now are valuing as first round picks. They're going to fall into round 3 or 4, right? There's a real chance. Let me just back this up real quick. There's a real chance some of these offensive tackles listed here, in the top 93, there's a chance some of these guys fall to the 5th round. Like Cameron Williams, I would not be shocked if he falls, right? Wyatt Milliam, I think, is going to fall, right? But I wouldn't be surprised even if Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks end up getting valued as guards if they're there in the 2nd round, even in the 3rd round, right? Probably not those two guys, but I wouldn't be surprised if, because of how this draft is with so many guys that fit specific schemes and systems, specific body structures. Also, don't forget, the Falcons, they rely on guys that are going to be in a 3-point stance way more than guys in a 2-point stance. So the Falcons, for example, would not target a guy like Will Campbell, right? Because Will Campbell does most of his work out of that unique 2-point stance he has, right? He's always often very high. The Falcons would not draft Will Campbell because of something like that, right? At the same time, they might say, hey, Josh Connerly's an elite mover. Let's take him and put him at guard, or let's take him and put him at tackle. So they might value someone a little bit differently, right? So yeah, it's going to be an interesting draft. We're right around the corner. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Apologies about the camera. I am moving here in 2 weeks. I already have a camera that will not cut out once we hit, 35-minute mark. But it's just a matter of getting it set up at the new house. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, man. If you did watch up to this point, let me know, man. Let me know you guys watched this 53-ish minutes through, and I appreciate the hell out of you guys. And I will see you guys next time with another video.